How many kids did you guys want to have?
We wanted to have 4. Yeah. And I was praying to God that I was pregnant when he got murdered.
Oh, wow. I thought of that once. Just like whether it was meant to be or whether we'd get news like that.
I was like, oh, goodness, that would be the ultimate blessing out of this catastrophe.
The questions exploded quietly at first, whispered behind closed doors, then suddenly surfaced into the open with a force that could no longer be ignored. At the center of it all is a family tragedy that has now become a public controversy, driven by suspicion, unanswered questions, and a growing demand for clarity. Before we go deeper into this unfolding story, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future updates as this case continues to develop. For years, long-standing suspicion has surrounded the paternity of Erika's children, with speculation suggesting that some, or possibly all, of them may not be Charlie Kirk's biological children. These doubts did not arise overnight, nor were they based on a single incident. Instead, they developed gradually, fueled by overlapping timelines, past relationships, and inconsistencies that many believe deserve closer scrutiny. Supporters of DNA testing argue that it is not about punishment or public shaming, but about establishing truth, particularly for the children involved. In their view, clarity around paternity is essential for inheritance matters, emotional closure, and the children's own sense of identity as they grow older. Critics, however, see the calls for testing as intrusive and insensitive, especially given Charlie's death. Yet, the persistence of the speculation has made it clear that silence has not resolved the issue. It has only amplified it. The debate has become less about rumor and more about accountability, with many insisting that scientific confirmation could finally put lingering doubts to rest. Adding to the controversy are concerns surrounding evidence and timelines, particularly Erika's account of her whereabouts on September 9th. Erika reportedly presented proof intended to establish where she was on that date, positioning it as a decisive answer to lingering questions. However, those examining the information closely say the evidence raised as many questions as it answered. Critics point to gaps in the timeline, inconsistencies in relationship overlaps, and unanswered questions about key periods that remain unclear. The issue is not just whether Erika can account for one specific date, but whether her broader narrative holds together under scrutiny. Observers argue that when a story is consistent, details align naturally over time. In this case, they claim, each new clarification seems to introduce fresh contradictions. These concerns have kept the spotlight firmly on the timeline, transforming what could have been a private matter into a focal point of public debate and legal interest. Initially, Charlie's parents were reluctant to question anything at all. They were grieving the loss of their son and hesitant to appear disrespectful toward a widow raising young children. But over time, their doubts began to grow. According to people close to the family, certain behaviors and repeated inconsistencies gradually eroded their trust. Small details that did not add up, shifting explanations, and decisions that felt dismissive of their role as grandparents all contributed to their unease. What made the situation particularly painful was the emotional conflict they faced, balancing compassion for Erika with the responsibility to protect their son's legacy and maintain a meaningful relationship with his children. Their growing concern was not driven by hostility, they insist, but by a sense that something fundamental was being withheld or obscured. As doubts accumulated, their silence became harder to maintain. Public attention intensified further with what critics have labeled Erika's grief tour. In the months following Charlie's death, Erika appeared frequently in public spaces, traveled extensively, and engaged actively with media platforms. To supporters, this visibility was a coping mechanism and a way to maintain stability through work and connection. To critics, however, it felt excessive and self-promotional, raising questions about priorities. They argue that the scale and speed of her public reemergence clashed with the expected focus on private mourning and parenting. The optics mattered, especially given the unresolved questions already surrounding her story. Each appearance, interview, or trip became another data point for those who believed the public presence was less about healing and more about shaping a narrative. Whether fair or not, this perception has significantly influenced public opinion. Concerns about Erika's treatment of the children added another layer to the controversy. Critics claim that after Charlie's death, there was little pause to allow the children time and space to process their loss. Instead, they allege that Erika quickly resumed her public life, relying heavily on nannies and caregivers. This, they argue, sent a troubling message about emotional priorities during a critical period of grief. Supporters counter that every parent grieves differently and that seeking help is not inherently neglectful. Still, the criticism persists because it intersects with the broader narrative of detachment and inconsistency. For many observers, the issue is not the use of support staff, but the speed with which normal routines and public ambitions seem to resume, leaving questions about whether the children's emotional needs were fully centered. Another recurring issue involves Erika's conflicting stories about how she met Charlie. Over time, she has reportedly shared multiple versions of their first encounter, each differing in key details. In isolation, minor discrepancies might be understandable, especially in retelling personal memories. But the frequency and scale of the contradictions have raised red flags for critics. They argue that the origin story of a relationship is usually one of the most consistent elements, not the most fluid. These shifting accounts have fueled skepticism about Erika's honesty and intentions, reinforcing the belief that parts of her narrative may have been constructed or revised to suit changing circumstances. The lack of a single, stable version has become emblematic of the larger trust issue at the heart of the dispute. Evidence suggesting pre-existing connections has further undermined the idea that Erika and Charlie met purely by chance. Records, photographs, and social links reportedly indicate that Erika may have known Charlie, or at least as close associates, years earlier than she claims. If true, this challenges the chance meeting narrative that has been publicly presented. Critics argue that such omissions or misrepresentations are significant because they reshape the entire context of the relationship. A prior connection would suggest planning or intent rather than coincidence and raises questions about why this information was not disclosed earlier. The possibility of a longer, more complex history has intensified calls for transparency. Past relationships have also played a major role in fueling speculation. Erika's serious relationships with men such as J.T. Massey and Cat Phillips have been closely examined, particularly where timelines appear to overlap with her relationship with Charlie. The fact that children were born around similar periods has intensified DNA speculation, with critics arguing that the overlaps warrant clear, factual answers. Supporters of Erika view this scrutiny as invasive and unfair, but others insist that the stakes, emotional, legal, and financial, justify a thorough examination. These past relationships have become central to the narrative, not because of moral judgment, but because they intersect directly with unresolved questions of paternity. Erika's silence on DNA testing has perhaps been the most polarizing issue of all. Insiders claim that she did not strongly resist the idea, yet she also did not actively pursue it. This ambiguous stance has been interpreted in different ways. To some, it suggests strategic silence, a calculated decision to avoid confirming or denying speculation while legal and public pressures evolve. To others, it reflects a desire to protect the children from further trauma. Regardless of interpretation, the absence of a clear position has allowed speculation to flourish unchecked. In a situation where definitive answers are possible, the lack of resolution has become its own statement. The conflict ultimately escalated into a legal battle when Erika allegedly cut Charlie's parents off entirely from the children. This decision marked a turning point, transforming private concerns and public speculation into a formal court dispute. For Charlie's parents, legal action was described as a last resort, driven by a belief that access to records, transparency, and judicial oversight were the only remaining paths to truth. The focus has now shifted to documentation, custody considerations, and the legal mechanisms that can compel clarity where personal appeals failed. What began as whispered doubt has evolved into a high-stakes confrontation with lasting implications for everyone involved, especially the children at the center of the storm. As this story continues to unfold, it highlights the complex intersection of grief, trust, and accountability. At its core, the dispute is not just about paternity or public image, but about truth, legacy, and the well-being of children who deserve clarity as they grow. The outcome of the legal process may finally answer the questions that have lingered for so long, but the emotional consequences will likely endure far beyond the courtroom. For continued updates and deeper analysis as this case develops, subscribe to stay informed.